Hey, let's take a look at episode 3 of season 3 of House of the Dragon. We get a cold opening. We don't really get that many cold openings. That is, an opening before the opening credits scene here. We had a couple of those, a few of those in the original Game of Thrones series, but I don't recall if we had one in House of the Dragon. But it makes sense for the structure of this particular episode, as we're going to get into in a second. But this is pretty much starting off with Ormond Hightower here, the head, the commander here, this regiment. Damon convincing him, hey, like the war's over, and you got to disband this regiment here, and he gives up the supposed son of Alicent Hightower, a Targaryen, because we haven't really seen supposedly this character. He's been mentioned. He's the I guess the writer of this dragon we see here. So he's a key figure, right? And the idea is that they can't have him be, he's one of the potential heirs of the successor to the throne following Aegon. So they gotta hold on to him. So that's the idea here, and it's it's like we were thinking like, damn, like he had this whole army here. We had the scene with him getting the note from Alicent a couple episodes ago, to withhold, to stand down for a second, and like I feel like we were speculating, we were thinking like there's gonna be a big battle scene, right? And it looks like there could still be a big battle scene with this troop here we're going to get into. But that's how you start off the episode. And we get into the opening credits here. And I don't know if there's anything different here this time. Is this different? No, that wasn't different, right? I don't know. Maybe some of this is different. I think this is different. Do we ever get a split like that before? I feel like that's a new thing. The split of the freaking threads there. So why I think they put that apart in the opening before the credits is because the rest of the episode is pretty much focused solely on the perspective of Rhaenyra. It's like, it's her story here. It's something I don't think we get in any of these Game of Thrones stuff, right? Have we ever had an episode just pretty much from one character's perspective? And so I appreciate the swing here of doing it this way, to really establish Rhaenyra's first pretty much day on the job as the queen, and her getting accustomed to all the responsibilities and pressures she has to deal with, kind of similar, mirroring a little bit of how Aegon had to go through that last season. I think it was like the first episode of last season too, or one of those. And it's nice to see, like, the Rhaenyra's crew here at the council table here. Funny enough, they don't really make use of the little balls here, which is interesting. That's a distinction here. They don't care so much about the proper order of things, supposedly, of what ought to be done at a meeting here. I guess indicating that they're doing something different, right? Are they doing something different? It looks like they're gonna try to do something different, but they have lost the coin. That's a big thing. They don't got the money to run things, and she wants to do a big ceremony for her inauguration. And that's gonna have to be delayed. And there's a lot of people in the court here who need assistance, with this and that, candles and such. And also another thing that's a repeating moment is her stumbling upon rats, because of course the rat catchers have been eliminated. They were all hung last season. So pretty much we're getting what would have been nice to have had with Daenerys in the Game of Thrones series, right? Because like I'm assuming you've watched Game of Thrones, but her sort of path to become a tyrant as the queen of the realm, Daenerys in the Game of Thrones was very sped up in the final season, right? And we didn't really get that buildup of her turning bad, and so I feel like they're kind of like making up for that by doing that with the Rhaenyra here, like trying to like build up the idea that she's has to compromise more and more of her values in order to rule this land, and I think in those terms, this episode is really effective. I and it it does a good job building it up, including like the music. There's like this like the soundtrack. There's like this bell that keeps coming around in moments when like she realizes that she has to maybe kill the heir, the Darren, the guy the kid they kidnapped from Otto Hightower's army, like things like that where she has like little moments where she's like has to like make these decisions. This little bell sounds in the background. I don't know if I can pinpoint exactly each moment, but maybe we'll come up with it. But like it's like this repetitive almost like motif that keeps going around in this episode, that kind of like builds the pressure, almost like a ticking time bomb. It's like, oh, it's like at some point she's gonna break, she's gonna become tyrannical. I don't know, is she? She's been in this episode, she's trying to do good. This scene, of course, is her confronting the religion of the realm, the seven gods, the septum of seven, or whatever they're called, who I think become, more prominent during the Game of Thrones times. And I guess, they were partners with the Hightowers, the previous regime, because the Hightowers were Alicent Hightower, that was the queen. And like, so, and the septum, I believe, have their main church or whatever in the city where the Hightowers reside, so they're good partners. And of course, they're anti-dragon and all that, and so they don't really respect the historically tyrannical Targaryens, and of course, as the more progressive minded Rhaenyra here, she's like perhaps not so concerned with the traditions of the septum church here, but of course he warns her, like, hey, like there's people, you don't want to betray the people who do believe in the church, and it's a large group, you don't want to make enemies of them. So we'll see where that goes, but it looks like she's breaking away from the church as is typical, because she's more of like, I guess like against this church, but she's all about the prophecy of the Song of Ice and Fire, and more the tradition of the Targaryen, so that's kind of another tradition she's more into. But she's becoming a little bit, again, trying to be pragmatic as well in terms when it comes to appearances in certain ways, like not being concerned about giving official name titles to Alan and Adam here, as Corlys asks here, like, hey, like, he has nothing left. Pretty much his castle burned down. Most of his family's dead, and so he's finally, at this moment, wanting to give his name to his illegitimate sons here to legitimize them. And it seems like a simple ask, a simple thing to do. But here Rhaenyra is questioning it, because she doesn't want to alienate, I guess, some of the people she wants to rule, or even like make it, or like kind of like point to how, like, if she does that, then people will like start talking again, like, oh, like she has her own, quote unquote bastard children, with the strong guy. Just her next the heir to her line is Joffrey, I think their name. And he's like supposedly most likely very much also like illegitimate son, supposedly, with the strong instead of Laenor was his name, I think, who was like his son actually. So she doesn't want to make that connection in the eyes of the public, so she's like questioning that. And one thing about this episode is that it is it's like they're continuing the pacing of the previous episodes, and that's something that I partly I appreciate, partly I don't, because like moments like this, I feel like this episode relies a lot of just like cutaways where you kind of have to like fill in the gap a little bit, or just like assume what happens here, but it feels unsatisfying because it ends with him like saying,
"It's simple enough."
Like simple enough, right? And then it cuts to her, and you don't really get a response. And this happens a couple of times in this episode where you don't really get a response. And even the follow up to this scene when Corlys calls her out in public, she doesn't even, you don't get a response either. So it feels like, for the sake of the tempo of this episode, they want to like keep going too quick, and they miss out on some key little moments here. Almost like it feels like they didn't quite know how to write a follow-up line for her, and so in some ways it's a nice pacing technique to kind of build up the tension, but it feels like a little bit also maybe lacking in the writing department, or an excuse to like not having dialogue there because they didn't know how to write that dialogue or something. So it kind of, so some of this episode I feel like feels a little bit mashed up, unconvincingly so sometimes, but I do like how I do appreciate, again, like the single focus on one character is interesting, because like I think in the books, right, definitely in the Game of Thrones books, we have like chapters from different perspectives. That's the whole thing about those books, is that each chapter is like a different perspective, and this might be one of the more equivalent representations of that, in all this whole franchise, right? And seeing just one episode per one perspective, with one perspective. So that's interesting. So then she's back on the throne, she's nervous and such. The first time she has to like see to the people's needs, and then she happens to get her period here. I guess maybe trying to illustrate the differences between a queen and a king. And luckily they don't go lean too much into that idea, like, oh, like because she's in her period she can't rule or whatever. That's good. But it's just part of the every like little part of like the bricks building up in her mind as she's trying to balance everything up, and focus here on ruling, after everything that's happened so far. And then like, she's trying to be a good ruler, and part of the idea of this episode and the story in general is that like, you may have these ideals and ideas to be one of a good ruler, but once you're in the throne, you're gonna have to make some choices you don't want, and which is something that Alicent reiterates later on when she seeks counsel. And then here, this is an interesting development here, is that she was one of the sex workers at the brothel. She was, she was like Eamon's preferred worker there, and she's like bringing up the idea that, hey, like all the aristocrats, the noble families have been hoarding, all this time during these times of troubles, and maybe we should get that redistributed, and that's an idea that lingers in her mind. I think that's what she's gonna do, right? Which is, we'll get into that. But back at the council table, there's some bickering between Massaria and Damon, of course. Corus is the hand, but Corus doesn't seem. Of course, Corus right here is like upset about Rhaenyra. So we get the idea that Rhaenyra didn't give him the proper answer. That's how we figure out kind of what happened there. Maybe she like just delayed it a little bit. Like I'll give you an answer later. So he's not really contributing too much and just like saying whatever you say, Queen. But is this the moment she decides what to take from the rich? I think maybe a little later. Oh yeah, she probably is planning it off screen, and then we have the dinner sequence, and we have the knighting of the dragon seeds, they call them, because they're the new dragon riders, and they pick their names. We got Ulf the White, a little bit of a scary moment here for a second. Are you gonna behead Ulf here? No. And then Hugh, what did he pick? He was a something. The name of the father.
In the name of the father.
I don't know. Sir Ulf. She doesn't even do their full names here, but he's like, the thing is that here she had the opportunity to give Adam the Valyrian name, but she decides against it. That's another thing we'll get into. And then again, she has all these, at least here she tries to explain to Hugh, like, hey, like, I got so much stuff going on. I can't attend to your specific needs at this moment, which are, of course, he needs some payment, and he, asks for a home for his family, or she's going to give him a home for his family, but she can't give it to him right away because of the whole thing. Because this is pretty much just the first day or so. Like, really, is it? It's at least the first week since her ascension here. By the way, she's also needing to get a new Queen's Guard. Because he's like just the cop, right? Pretty much the chief of the cops. And so that's the other thing she's gonna have to do. And so, we really see like, all the stress that she has to go through here. And here she's asking Alicent, who's like become a prisoner. That's another thing is that we skipped the moment from last episode, the moment she ascended the throne and had that contorted, conflicted look in her face with tears, and then becoming, more affirmed and strong at the end as a cut to credits. And then, because we were wondering what she's going to do with Alicent and Helena, she ends up just pretty much imprisoning them, but in comfortable quarters here. And of course, this is what they're discussing here. Like, we should get free, but it's like, no, you gotta, not until I find Aegon or it's not until Aemond is dead, pretty much, because he's the biggest challenger really to the throne is Aemond. So they're going to be stuck here till then, and that's just kind of like one of the things here, right? Like, she says she's not not happy about this, but it's one of those things that she has to do in order to maintain that order and respect as a queen. And part of the thing also is that like the war was set in motion, like there's no turning back situation, like she wishes things could be different, but this is just how it has to go for now. And so that's part of the troubled dynamic, friendship between both of these characters who are central to the story here. And then, which is kind of funny because now she's like asking for her friend / prisoner, for advice, because Alicent has been in this position of power before, pretty much acting as queen, during Aegon's rule. And she's basically laying out like, hey, like you're gonna have to make these decisions you don't want to do, and you're gonna have to compromise your values and stuff and your principles. And Rhaenyra is like, actually, I'm not gonna change. I'm gonna still, hold on to who I am. It's not gonna change me too much. The power corrupts situation here, which I think Rhaenyra is gonna be learning a little bit of the hard way as we see. And this is again something that I imagine we'll see as the season progresses, which is close to the halfway point now for the season, and similar to mirroring, of course, what Daenerys went through, but in a more prolonged here in a few episodes, several episodes, which is I think good to see. So this is a really fun sequence. She invites all the noble houses for dinner. This is the kind of boldness that we like to see from a queen here, showcasing that she's gonna redistribute the wealth, by force if necessary, and that's what is gonna have to happen. She gives them a meal of rats and maggots, I believe, to illustrate like this is what the lower folk, the common folk are eating, while you are plump and happy in your homes and your big mansions or whatever. And and of course that pisses them off because they're like, oh, we were just protecting our families, we were protecting ourselves, and this guy's a little bit amused, but I feel like he's trying to point out that like, hey, you're making enemies with the noble houses, with the aristocrats here, but Rhaenyra is unmoved. She's like, I'm still on top here. You're not gonna. But this, I feel like, is kind of like this gives a bit of revolutionary vibes. Maybe a little bit of Lenin here, like the of like taking from the bougie. I mean, this is aristocrats, and giving in. Taking she's not exactly taking their land, or these aren't like, she mentions that actually in this scene that some of these are merchants, so it's maybe a little bit of a mix of some proto-capitalist, perhaps proto-mercantilist, who own certain stuff. So she's not exactly taking their props, their capital, like their fact, maybe their mercantile markets or whatever. She's just going into their homes and taking some of the stuff, some of their hoarded wealth, food and grain and stuff, and she's going to deliver out, but it also, it's like, it feels like this could lead to a different type of revolution, maybe, I mean, this is like takes place before Game of Thrones, and it's still a feudal system in at that point, but this is just reminding me of like perhaps the aristocrat / mercantile elite could probably establish some kind of revolt and some kind of revolution similar to the French Revolution or something like that, right? Where where the bourgeoisie takes over the monarchy, so maybe you could have some elements of that. Another faction that fights against Rhaenyra here upcoming, which is an interesting development here, because I'm pretty sure it's indicating that like they're gonna be enemies of Rhaenyra. But of course, in a more populist move, the people are gonna love this. For the time being, Daemon is saying how like, hey, like this is maybe a temporary fix, but we still have to get our gold. And Daemon's like, hey, we have all these dragons. We should just go conquer all the rest of Westeros, and take the gold we need, But Rhaenyra again is being, not so aggressive and more of a people's queen. And it's like, hey, like let's take care of King's Landing first before we expand. If we do, and like we got to make sure we can take care of our people first. And she mentions her father here, who said that dragons we should not trifle with them. And so, she's trying to kind of limit herself a little bit. It's like, even saying that, Viserys knew that there was such a thing as too much power, So again, like right here, we're just at the beginning of Rhaenyra's ascension here, where she has a lot more power now, but she still has that good principled heart of like, hey, like I shouldn't get too greedy, too, up in my head about being a god, which is what Daemon's about. It's like, hey, we're gods, we're Targaryen gods with the power to control dragons. But Rhaenyra is more humanistic, of course. So, but of course, she's still, she's still like an authoritarian queen. She's not even she's not even as for the people compared to like as much as she believes she is. She's not quite a Massaria, and she's definitely not even a Lenin. But I think she believes she's the best for the play. The best queen for the moment. And even going up here and delivering a nice speech to move the people and give back, doing some charity work, almost, it seems like it, for the next couple weeks or so. This might satisfy the people, but if she doesn't, find her treasure, the gold of the monarchy that they spread out, because part of the thing is that the Lannister guy, he divided the gold up and hid it somewhere, so that's what they're looking for. So if they don't find that, they could be screwed, and there could be some kind of revolt in the streets, even from the people, and then also from the merchant class and the aristocrat class. So that could be a big thing she's gonna have to deal with. But she's successfully given off an image of a good queen that cares for the folk. So this is presented in that way. And then also she sent out was it Daemon to go to the Vale to get gold from the lady there, who, by the way, is hosting sheep stealer dragon with Rhaena around there, semi hosting, like by proxy, not really acknowledging, not really legitimately acknowledging that she's hosting them. So that's gonna be a thing. And so here we have the culmination of this plot beat here of Corlys asking for confirmation. Hey, how come you didn't give the Valyrian name to my son Adam? You called him Adam of Hole at the knighting ceremony, and this is where it breaks the final straw here. And Corlys is like, that's all I got, and you betrayed me. He actually calls her sons bastards, screams it out, very much almost identical to what his brother did, Vaemon, I believe his name was, back in season 2, was it season 1? And where Viserys, ordered his tongue, and Daemon cut his head off, which was a really extreme moment, and and showcased how Viserys at that point would not tolerate any besmirchment of his name, of the Targaryen name, by and defending the honor of his daughter, and his heirs, because it looks so bad, to have illegitimate, quote unquote bastard children to rule to take the throne, or to be heirs to the throne. And so so of course, at that point Vaemon saw them as hypocrites, and now Corlys is doing the same here. Although now Corlys has something to gain here, because he can have his name passed on, his legacy passed on, because that's what he cares about, right? Legacy and names. This whole time, to his only remaining family really is Adam and Alan. And Rhaenyra is justifying this by like, hey, like, this is a sensitive, vulnerable time for me right now. I can't do something like that, even though, which of course it's a bit obviously hypocritical, but also like, she's had all these wild decisions. Like, she's pretty much going against the septums. She's not being very diplomatic with the church, but now she's trying to be respectful when it comes to this, because I think she's mostly concerned about herself here. She feels like she can stand up to the church, but she probably doesn't feel like she can like stand up against critiques in regards to the legitimacy of her heir, because she's even asked for Joffrey to be sent to come here to King's Landing to prepare to be the next heir. That feels, that's a little bit more something she feels she's more vulnerable with, is if it starts going around, and the idea that once again resurface the idea that he's not legitimate, but as like a supposedly progressive queen, she could kind of like stand up for herself and stand up for her sons and for people who aren't from this like supposedly proper lineage, and be like, hey, like, maybe we don't have to rely on names so much, and more rely on who is worthy to be respected and be heirs or whatever. And so maybe she has the power, and in this moment of transition, she could stand up for Corlys's sons and her own, and either dismiss or embrace the idea of bastards. She could, and even before, right? She in the last season, during the moments where she had to find new riders for her dragons to get a bigger dragon army, she embraced the idea of looking for illegitimate bloodline people who were on the bloodline to ride dragons. So she, I think she said like something about we'll have an army of bastards or something. And so it's like, so she's being inconsistent here because she's solely focused on herself, in terms of her son and her heir. So of course, and then of course this also has these overtones, these racial overtones, which were also very present with the scene with Vayman back when he was beheaded, of the platinum blonde white family, against the Black Valerians, and not giving them the respect, or not giving them any sort of power, beyond what they have. And so there's tinges of that, but of course the a criticism I've had before is that like this show is kind of not so concerned with racism in this world. It's almost like, which is odd because it's so concerned with sexism is a big thing about this fantasy world, the patriarchy in here, but it feels a little bit too scared to delve into racial politics. It just feels a little bit, inconsistent with the idea of trying to be a fantasy story that's based on realistic medieval times. And so on one hand, it is nice that it seems to be a world that's not really racist. But it just feels at odds with the idea that like they're choosing and picking what they want to represent in this world. They want to focus on gender, but not so much race. There's it's somewhat, it's nice, like, hey, it's nice that at least we don't have to really experience that in the show and kind of just watch it without really perhaps in a world where racism doesn't exist, it's nice, but then we have to experience sexism though, and even like see that last episode, we have that scene with Allison experiencing sexual assault, so I don't know, but I think like it would, if it was more clear what the racial politics in this world was, this scene would be would have given a lot more weight to it, because within the universe, this feels like race isn't even that much of a thing here, but the subtext is there for viewers from the real world, but I don't know, that's just the thought there. And then she goes back to Allison and she's like, I could, she's basically saying, I could have decided to kill your son, but I'm decided to sending him to the wall, and Allison's like, well, should I be grateful, that you're not going to kill my son? And then here's the big twist, is that, he hasn't been saying anything this whole time. So I've been suspecting, it's like, oh, like he's planning, either he has some kind of plan up in his head. They've been telling, the high towers or someone, the team green has been doing some kind of persuading or manipulation to like get him to do some kind of spy work or something. So he's been keeping his mouth shut. It didn't quite read to me as he was just super shy. It's like there's something behind that, some reason, and the reason is he's not really Allison's son. And that was the whole thing. Just showcases how Ormond Hightower is playing a serious game here. He like bent the knee, but it didn't really mean much of anything. He just did that in the moment to not be slaughtered and burned by dragons, to recuperate and to think about what his next plan was. But he already had somewhat of a plan in mind, which is to give up a fake Targaryen kid, which will delay things a little bit while he prepares for battle. And he ends up taking a different city with his army. This guy comes along and says Tumbleton. That's the idea. But so what's interesting here is the kid his hair was dyed, to make him look like Targaryen. The thing is that like it seems like almost immediately Alicent doesn't recognize that this Darren kid isn't really Darren. And it doesn't take much for Rhaenyra to realize what's going on here. So she has a good read on Alicent here. But it's interesting that Alicent doesn't outright say anything. It's almost like, was Alicent maybe trying to play along here? Like, did she know? No, I mean, I don't think she knew that they got Darren here, but maybe she was calculating. She was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't say anything. But she couldn't lie to Rhaenyra here. Like, because I feel like Alicent's always thinking about what's the best thing to do to protect, not only herself, but, her family as well, particularly like Helena and her sons. And so, because like maybe she would have played along with it if Rhaenyra didn't suspect anything. Maybe she would have thought it would be nice. I mean, maybe, she'll sacrifice this random kid to go to the wall, as long and have her son still be out there. But I feel like she couldn't do that here. And so she's like, well, I gotta acknowledge that this isn't my son. And she'll keep playing along for as long as she can to be on Rhaenyra's side. And these next few episodes, I imagine, are going to be kind of about really how these two work together or not, and what are they going to keep from each other, That's this whole series about that, really. Like, it's they're the central figures, of course, obviously. And so then she gets news that Tumbleton has taken Tumbleton. I don't exactly know much about Tumbleton. I don't know why the Firekeeper is here. Did they like take some of the dragons? I'm not sure. I guess they must have taken control of some of the dragons or something. It's taken over Tumbleton, infiltrated its streets. People were hostages. And the young dragon, they took it inside the gates. So I think the young dragon is the Darren's dragon, Alicent Hightower's son's dragon that Rhaenyra thought she took the kid, but I guess they didn't hold on to the dragon. Maybe they took the dragon as well, and the keepers were holding on to Darren's dragon, and he's saying that the Hightowers also took the dragon, who was maybe stationed at Templeton or something. Either way, like, they've decided to take that town, and they're setting it up as a stronghold to fight against Rhaenyra. So that's the next battle here. She's confident that, she could win. We have the ending here with her looking into the fire, burning up all the high tower, symbolism, symbols. the drapery, the furniture that was all high tower stuff. Like I don't know why they really had to get rid of some of the furniture just because it was green. It was upholstered with green stuff. But I thought maybe they were like looking for the gold, and they were like, maybe they thought some of the gold was hidden around in the castle, and they were like, taking out all the furniture to look for it. I don't know, but they're pretty much burning it, of course, symbolizing that she wants to burn them. She's gonna go burn Tumbleton, is she? Like, the thing is that the Dragon Keeper's like, you'd burn your people too, because they're part of your kingdom, if she goes too aggressive with it. But is this another step? Do we hear little bells here? I don't know. Maybe. But again, it kind of ends, each ending, last week's ending, this week's ending, is her getting a little stronger. And or a little meaner, a little strong-willed, or a little ready to fight more, like it. So I guess she'll try to infiltrate Templeton. Maybe we'll see. We'll see how she's gonna organize some kind of battle there or something. I feel like did Damon already leave for? He probably already left. I don't know. We'll see where it goes. But yeah, like, this was an interesting episode, unlike any other episode in terms of how it's structured, which is the perspective of Rhaenyra. And I feel like some of the lines here, maybe at the council table, felt a little bit somewhat heavy-handed. The idea of just like them talking about is it worth protecting the people, like what it feels a little bit repetitive of like what they've already gone through, like how Rhaenyra as a queen should rule, Daemon being more uncaring about the people, Mysaria being about protecting the people. The rat little motif was fun, and always seeing those little rats around, reminding her of perhaps the corruption around seeking in, the uncleanliness of the whole place. Reminding her of like what she maybe has to do that she doesn't want to do. Is that what? Yeah, and but yeah, it's nice to see finally Rhaenyra as the queen ruling. Definitely, if I had to pick, that would been my preferred choice to see as the queen. But then, at what cost? And now that she's queen, she has to do all of these, perhaps despicable things, just trying her best, and she's trying to be a somewhat, has some kind of, she does have some more populist policies, maybe a little bit more socialistic in terms of redistribution. But at the end of the day, she's still the queen, the monarch. She's not going to give up that power real easily. I don't even think they have any concept of democracy here in this world. Maybe they do. Maybe like maybe in Essos or somewhere. I don't know. Maybe there might be some other places. But it'd be interesting to see what these what these rich folk at the rat dinner are gonna do about Rhaenyra, and if they will start trying to propagandize the people against Rhaenyra. I don't know, in terms of, maybe they'll be like, oh, maybe we should be taking the monarchy down, and let us, the bougie people, take control. But I can't. But I don't know. Maybe not, because here it's they obviously are against the aristocrats. But yeah, we'll see. Like it. Yeah. Again, it seems like it's building up for Rhaenyra to be potentially having again to come to terms with what it means to be queen in this world, and like, is she, how many people is she gonna burn, and how much is she gonna compromise in order to protect the realm as the queen that was promised, in the Song of Ice and Fire. We'll see. But yeah, it was definitely probably one of the more interesting episodes in regards to the politics of everything, of the city and all that we've seen in a great while. The thing is that, if Corlys like decides to go against Rhaenyra, that could be another thing too. Like it's like, it feels like little elements here of her own party are crumbling. It's like, how long is she gonna hold on to all her allies? And then we have again another member. We have Alicent here as another potential spoilage to Rhaenyra's reign here. But yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I feel like this is chipping away at the idea of Rhaenyra. Like this episode, I feel like, is trying to chip away at the idea of Rhaenyra being the perfect queen, or that the idea of this feudal system can be reformed, as long as there's a benevolent queen at the top. I think that's kind of the theme about the theme of the whole franchise, really. That the power corrupts and all that. Well, that's that episode. Shit, the video was frozen this whole time. How long have I been yapping while that this image has been on screen? I gotta resync it. That was that her back in the
She's gone.
In the church?
This will be
Read.
That might have been back in that frozen image, but I was scrubbing around a lot. But yeah, that's this episode.
genteel.
Let me know what you think. Next time, we'll be back with some more House of the Dragon. I'll see you then. Bye bye.